This right here is the very first pistol I owned. It's a Colt King Cobra 357 Magnum, based off the Trooper Mark V series, and it's one of the improvements. A lot of people in law enforcement, if they had the money, would get these. They were considered a little bit better than the Smith & Wessons. They have a wider spur hammer on them, a full-length lug on them and everything. And they're just one of those that shoots double action or single action, and they're fun, I think. Nothing like a revolver. Alright, so in the last video I did, I talked about the very first firearm I bought. This video right here, I'm going to go over the very first pistol that I bought. And the very first handgun pistol revolver that I bought was a Colt King Cobra 357 Magnum. At the time, it was something that I thought would be kind of neat and powerful and reliable. And this is the pistol that I bought that I ended up owning as my first handgun. This is also a pistol that my son first shot as his first centerfire. Brought him up shooting pellet guns and 22s, and eventually he got to shoot this. Hopefully when my grandson comes down next time, this will be the first pistol that he shoots. I don't know if he shot anything yet or not, but it's something to pass on to them, and eventually my son will end up getting this pistol right here. Let's go inside and take a little bit deeper look into it. Alright, so in 1986, Colt came out with the Colt King Cobra. Marked King Cobra on the top of here. And it was kind of the poor man's Python. The Colt Python was kind of the premier pistol that Colt made for a revolver. And the King Cobra was something they kind of marketed to be an improvement on their Mark V, their Mark V series. And it incorporated a full lug on it. The ejector was protected on it, so it wasn't open. A lot of the older revolvers had an open ejector that could get damaged or dented. And then they had a thin barrel profile. They didn't have the reinforcing lug on it and everything. And this pistol, the original ones that came out, they ran for a few years, I think from 86 to maybe around 92 or so. But they're smooth on the top part right here. The later ones, they ended up revamping, I think around 94. I think from 94 to 98, they made another run of them. But they ended up putting some mounting screws here so people could put scopes and stuff on them if they wanted and mount accessories to them. But they're primarily marketed towards kind of like law enforcement, self-defense type stuff. 357 Magnum is a really good round. Back then it had a really good reputation. A lot of police officers still trusted it. A lot of them were also carrying the 45, but there wasn't a lot of faith in the 9mm at the time. And the 84, 86 Miami shootout with the FBI kind of drew attention to that. It has a orange front sight on it. The rear's adjustable. It has a wider hammer spur on it. And the gate release for the cylinder latch release, it pulls towards the rear. So it has little serrations on it. I don't know how much it'll show up here, but the serrations, kind of just grab it with your thumb, push it back, and it'll open up. 6-shot revolver, medium frame sized, but it's really good. The Python was considered a little bit better, but for affordability, these were the way to go. I think it was like around $350 or so. It's right around the price of 357 was right around $357 when I bought it back in the early 90s. But this right here is a revolver that I really liked. They ended up later making them in stainless and other colors, but the blued finish that Colt put on it I think is really good. Let's compare this to some others. Alright, so here we have the Colt King Cobra and the Smith & Wesson 686. The King Cobra and 686 are similar in size. This right here is a 686 Plus, which gives 7 rounds of 357 instead of 6 rounds of 357. One of the things I like about the Colt is that they kind of smoothed and angled the barrel lug area, so for holstering and drawing and everything, it's rounded off, and I think it looks a little bit better overall. On the Smith & Wesson, it's kind of squared off. There's a very slight polished taper to it, but overall, in comparison, they're very similar. The orange high visibility sights, the rear adjustable sights. On the Smith & Wesson, you push it to the front to open the cylinder latch. Like I said, this one right here is a 7-shot. But by pushing forward, you end up releasing it. The spur hammer on most of the Smith & Wessons are real narrow versus a wider hammer on the Colts. So it's a lot easier to get it if you're off on the side a little bit, or if you're getting your thumb up on it. It's a lot easier, I feel, to get and manipulate it. With the Smith & Wesson, it's kind of squared off and a little bit more angled. But the overall design and size are very similar, and both of them were marketed to law enforcement. The police department I work for, in inventory at one time, they carried the Smith & Wesson 686s, and they still kept them in their inventory. Being stainless steel, they tend to be a little bit more durable than, say, a blued finish, which requires a little bit more maintenance and wiping down. But overall, I tend to like the black finish better overall. Let's take a look at the Python. All right, this here's the Colt Python. This right here is the revolver of all revolvers for some. Texas Rangers and lawmen and people into collecting stuff really like the Pythons. Overall, the Python's supposed to be built on a larger frame. On the lower part of the cylinder and stuff, it is a bit different, but if you look at them from the top and take measurements and everything, overall they're almost identical until you get down to some of the screws and the way it's set up. But the upper portions here are almost identical, other than having the rib vent and some stuff like that. On the cylinder latch, on the Python here, it's actually smooth. There's no rib vents or anything like that. The spur hammer is a little wider and more curved, so you get a little bit more, I guess, usable hammer if you want to cock it. The Python overall is a very smooth, I mean, people talk about like certain watch actions and stuff like that, but the Python is just amazing for the way it's put together and how smooth the trigger and action is on it. The King Cobra is a little less refined, but it's still overall a decent firearm. It just doesn't have that smoothness and just amazing action part to it that's fitted and took a lot of work. Both of these have newer versions out. The newer Pythons, I looked at them, I wasn't overall impressed. The newer King Cobras, I really don't like at all. The easiest way to tell if it's a newer one, number one, they're not going to have blued ones. But number two, the trigger guard here tends to get narrower, where it kind of opens up on the bottom here to get your finger in. They stretched it out and it kind of slopes upward more. So if you see the trigger guard sloped upward, it's probably the newer King Cobras. To me, they're just not assembled the same or look the same. The Pythons are very close. I think they made some changes or improvements to the new ones that came out. I know some people had some little issues and quirks with them, but these are the firearms that a lot of law enforcement and stuff used. Texas Rangers really were into the Pythons, one of those things that costs a little bit of money, but it's also kind of a status symbol, but it's also a great target type revolver. On the front here, similar to Smith & Wesson, it's like a blocked lug. It doesn't have that smoothness to it. So looking at doing like law enforcement tactical stuff, a lot of people like the 4-inch barrels versus the longer barrels. And the shorter barrels are more for carry personal protection. But most people realize rather than having a 2-inch full frame or medium frame 357, it's easier to go to the smaller J frames and everything. But like I said, the Colt King Cobra to me is kind of my go-to. This is more of a grail gun that I got. I actually got a couple of them, but the Python's more of a grail gun. The King Cobra is one of those that I just got, shoot, and love. Something that really holds a place in my gun collection for me. With revolvers, you can use speed clips. They're easy to just insert, twist, and let the rounds drop in. If you want to fire in single action, you can also do single action. To me, it's just fun. Revolvers with the double action, single action, and the weight of them just makes it kind of impulse recoil back a little bit, but it's not as much of a recoil as like a 44 or some of the semi-autos that are out there that are kind of hot. Just one of those pistols that is fun to shoot if you're into revolvers and stuff like that, and I feel they're more accurate than semi-autos. 6 shots. Smith & Wesson does have a 7, and now there's even 8-shot revolvers out there. I don't know how well it'll show up on here, but these federal jacketed semi-hollow points are great for hunting stuff like hogs and everything. A little bit more recoil and heat to them, but they hit and they mushroom out pretty well, and the jacket helps hold it together a little bit better. It's just fun. One of the things different about a Colt is that the cylinder goes from right to left, kind of clockwise. Most go in the opposite direction and everything. So when you pull it back, the cylinder is going to rotate towards your right, versus on Ruger and Smith & Wessons, it's going to be towards your left. Only loaded up 5 rounds that time just to have an empty cylinder when I rotated it. With the advancement and reliability of firearms nowadays, the Colt King Cobra is a decent revolver, but it is heavy, it is cumbersome for home protection and for the needs I wanted back in the early 90s. It fit my needs. Today, if I had to do it all over again, I'd probably go for one of the more reliable semi-automatics out there, possibly something smaller and lighter. Overall, the Glocks kind of took over within the law enforcement community. King Cobras were one of those things that cost a little bit more than some of the Smiths, so not a lot of people carried them. And revolvers kind of went away, and the semi-automatics came in with technology that developed the 9mm rounds that make them a lot more lethal and help out with the accuracy and reliability nowadays. The revolver is something that is usually a backup or something that I guess maybe some of us older people use. But still something good, still something I trust my life to if I had to. But definitely want something a little bit slimmer and a little bit lighter if you're going to be carrying it or having it stored somewhere. Still a great gun, hunted a lot of hogs with it. Great for cleaning up the piglets that are running around and everything. But the 357 is definitely better for hunting than a 9mm or even 45s. But this right here was my go-to pistol for the longest time, and something that I still cherish today and will pass down to my kids, and hopefully they'll pass it down to their kids. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, Cav Cop out.